My partner and I, everyone here has disclosed this length of tenure in the insurance business, and I'm not fond of doing that because, well, I'm older than my partner, and I would just tell you that collectively we have over 50 years of experience in the insurance business, and I think it's still interesting after all these years, but I'm not going to talk about insurance per se. I would like you to actually flip in your book to section 7 and look at a chart with me. I'm going to talk about the weather. And the weather is what we buy insurance for here in Florida, as we heard a lot about, property insurance. And where is our weather going this year? I thought maybe we should think about it a little bit more and maybe try to understand it. The chart here is from Dr. William Gray and Philip Klotzbach, and I know both of them. They're with the University of Colorado. I've been following their theories, and so has the insurance industry, as well as subsidizing their research for many, many years. I think I went to a hurricane conference in the 1980s and saw Dr. Gray. But just to look at this chart, I think it's interesting. I can't give the presentation that they do because they're PhDs and this is what they do. But I can understand this chart, and I think it is interesting if you're living in Florida to have a better understanding of what to expect and to understand what the weathermen are talking about, because they get going and the predictions, we all kind of poo-poo the predictions of how many storms there's going to be, and is it a science? I will tell you it is a science. Is it exact? No, because it deals with the weather, and you know how the weathermen are. But if you look at this chart, just to give you an idea of how they look at predictions, they look at the past. And they look at the years from 1950 to 2000. And they take averages over all those years of the number of storms, the named storm days, the hurricane days, major hurricane days, and they come up with averages for each year. Those numbers in the parentheses on the left-hand side of each of the topics there, named storms or whatever, when you see 9.6, that means, generally speaking, in an average year. When you hear them talking about average year, above average, below average, we haven't heard below average in a few years. But an average year is 9.6 named storms, tropical storm, hurricane. And what are our predictions? And then we all kind of laugh at them and say, well, they predict in December, and then in April, and then again in June, and then again in September. Well, by September, they ought to have it down because it's mostly done. But they do get closer by September. I think there are some interesting things to look at here. Their prediction in December was showing 17 storms, 16 now for their April prediction, and their June 1st prediction. That's the most recent one. You can look at all those numbers, and you can see that all of them went down slightly. I look at anything for a positive, optimistic view here, and if the numbers are going down, that means maybe they're not so sure that there's going to be that many storms. But the bottom number here is it's just real easy. 100%, if you had 100 there, you'd be having an average year. Look at these numbers. 180, 175. That means we are going to have a hurricane season, whether they're big hurricanes, little hurricanes, days, or whatever, of 75% above average. Now, we've been running above average for the last 10 years, probably. And I think the worst predicted years, or not predicted so accurately years, were the 2004 and 5. And it was more near and dear to our hearts because they hit us, And last year we had a very, very busy hurricane season, but they didn't hit anywhere, and that's really good for the insurance industry, for the level of our property insurance premiums. That's great news. No hurricanes. What are they whining about? And I know I've read the same things that Randy was talking about when he said that, property carriers and the reinsurance carriers are having a terrible year so far. Well, they insure everything globally. I mean, they're looking at tsunamis, the Japan thing. We've got the tornadoes, quite frankly, in the United States are small in the scheme of things. They're horrific, and life lost is horrific. But from a property insurance damage standpoint and an insurance standpoint, they are small. Something like Japan, hopefully, you know, what happens in Japan stays in Japan. They have a lot of their own insurance there. Some of it was not insured, but nonetheless, it is going to affect the reinsurance carriers globally with those losses and other losses throughout the world that our carriers here in Florida that we buy insurance from buy their reinsurance from. So now you have legislation, Senate Bill 408, that Randy talked about, where they've approved that insurance carriers can pass on up to 15% of their reinsurance increase in costs. So, you know, I get a question all the time, well, hurricane forecasts, does that scare the insurance companies? Is that why they raise their rates? Because hurricane predictions are, you know, saying above average or, you know, 175% of normal. And the answer is really no. I mean, it's all about modeling, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the reinsurance that pays for all the claims and this 15%, I don't want you to get too scared. I know we're trying to scare you that, you know, property rates are going to go up. and that's not the case. The 15% that's in the legislation is a very small component of a rate makeup that insurance companies come up with. And Randy talked about that extensively, but I know that when reinsurance carriers put out a 30% rate increase, what normally filters down to us in our rate is maybe 5% of that, because the insurance companies have to absorb some of their cost of doing business, and it fluctuates from year to year. Some years they make money on their investments, some years they don't. Sometimes their reinsurance costs go up. All the factors that they deal with and in making a profit and in setting rates. Hurricane predictions are not really one of them, but I think it's something that we here locally really need to pay attention to. And I'm going to talk more about hurricane planning that we should be doing here in this room, and there is a sample plan in here that I'll let you look at in a second. But that one other weather phenomenon that you hear bantered about by the weathermen, and I always have to kind of think about it and say, well, is that the good one or the bad one, is El Nino or La Nina. And what does that mean and what is it? And basically, both of those phenomenons are large-scale changes in sea temperatures in the central and eastern Pacific. And eventually, they affect our hurricanes' frequency and severity in our hurricane season. La Nina is when it gets cooler in the Pacific. And that says when we have a La Nina, we are coming off a La Nina, as they are telling us now, we are coming off a La Nina. And in La Nina times, we have more storms and more severe storms. So that's not our friend. El Nino is when the water gets warmer in the Pacific. Now, you always hear about sea temperatures and, oh, it's the Gulf of Mexico is hot and the Atlantic is hot, and that is increasing our chances. This is about the Pacific water temperatures. So it's a global weather phenomenon, but El Nino would tell us that we would have less storms. And they're saying now, well, we're in a neutral zone. We are in between right now and going into the summer between La Nina and El Nino. Ooh, what does that mean? And I kind of said, well, I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. We're going to go into an El Nino next and less storms, and that's good for us. And these hurricane predictions need to come down and get real. And then I did some research into that and found out that the neutral zone is worse than La Nina. Historically, when you're in a neutral area, you could have more intense and more storms than even in La Nina period. So no good news there. But I just wanted to scare you a little bit more about the fact that we need to focus here on what it is we're insuring for, and it is really all about hurricanes. And before I get into hurricane planning and And some of you came to our seminar last year where we did nothing but hurricane planning, and it was much more detailed. I wanted to talk about how do insurance companies really, if they don't pay attention to hurricane forecasts, what are they paying attention to, and why would rates go up, and why would reinsurance rates go up? Reinsurance rates are going up now because of modeling, and Randy referred to that as well. And there are these 5 companies that produce computer models that actually take the characteristics of individual buildings and they run a storm over them and they say, here's how much that building's going to get damaged. Now, for an insurance company, when they go to write your particular condominium association, they look at your mitigation form and they go out and do an inspection, and we as agents give them this much information now. I can remember, because I've been in the business a long time, that it was what's the address, you know, how many stories and what's the value, and that was all we needed to know. Now we have about 25 different pieces of information just for property insurance, and it's all about this modeling stuff, because they put it in the computers, into these models, and they run, you know, pretend hurricanes, historical hurricanes over them, and they come up with a probable maximum loss for your building, for their aggregate amount of property that they have in this zip code, for the aggregate amount that they have in the 3 counties on the East Coast, for all of Florida. I can remember just, 2 years ago, we used to have tiers in Florida, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, and we were 2, and in Central Florida was 3, and the East Coast of Florida was 1. They were bad. We were in the middle ground, and the middle was safe. And after 2004 and 5, forget that. All of Florida is Tier 1. They don't care anymore. You know, we're all going to get hit because we've proven that. Those storms that went through Central Florida, now they didn't do as much damage as a Charlie did when it hit here, but nonetheless, they had hurricanes in Central Florida and they had damage. So it just proved that those hurricanes can go anywhere they want to, and they love Florida. But so when we're looking at these models, the interesting thing about this is that the modeling companies sell their modeling software to insurance companies, to insurance brokers, so that they can underwrite, so they can look at what should be happening. And the models, some of them this year, the most predominant one that's out there is Risk Management Solutions 11.0, 2011. It's their latest version. And what that version is saying to the insurance industry is scaring the bejeebies out of property underwriters. It is predicting that their probable maximum losses for their book of business, say for Florida or Southwest Florida, are going to go up substantially. Anywhere I've heard from 25 to 100%. So while they may have thought last year, oh, our probable maximum loss is $4 billion. It could be $8 billion with this model. So what does that do in the insurance industry from a pricing standpoint? Well, when Randy's companies go to buy reinsurance, the reinsurers, they show us your modeling results. And there it is. And, you know, they're now saying, well, also the rating companies, AM Best is looking at carriers and saying, are you capable of paying for, you know, 2 PMLs in a year, and at the 250-year level or the 100-year level is what the state requires. They're a little more lenient because they are. So I think it's going to have the most dramatic effect on our pricing. So I said I wasn't going to scare you. I'm just going to tell you this is coming. These models are out there. There's one EquiCat actually have models that decreased for Florida. So are they perfect? No. Is there consensus that they're accurate in the industry? No. Every time I go to an underwriter, I'll say, and they always go, well, we have to model that. We have to model that particular property. We have to model it in our book, and, you know, okay, hurry up and model it and then tell me what you think about it. But I think that there is not consensus in the industry. Some underwriters say, well, we use the models as a tool, and we like to think that we can still underwrite because we're intelligent human beings and we know a good risk when we see one. And we have our parameters of what we're looking for, etc. And yay, because we like the human being aspect. The models, I think, are influenced, perhaps. This is my personal opinion. I saw it this year where carriers were saying, oh, the new RMS 11, I've got to have a price increase of 30%. Others were saying 5%, others were saying nothing. So they were not consistent in their view of what they should do with their pricing. And that's okay, but it makes us insurance agents a little crazy, because trying to keep track of who's really following the models and using them to promulgate their rates is difficult. I think that the models from year to year change, and I would say that I've now observed, particularly with RMS, and Randy, you can pipe in here anytime, that they are cyclical in nature. They go up, and they say, ooh, you know, because we've had 2004, 2005, ooh, we had Katrina, you know, all these storms, and they start putting them into the software to do the modeling, and as time goes on, those losses grow because, as you know, Katrina took forever. I had a Charlie claim in 2004 that finalized in 2008. So, $65 million. But it takes time, and those claims tend to grow over time. So then as historical data grows in severity of those losses, meaning higher numbers, they are revising these models year after year. But historically, we've seen this little cyclical thing where we get this big spike, like this year, RMS 11 has hit us again, and it's killing us, you know, and it's affecting psychologically the insurance industry as to raising rates. Hopefully next year they'll get enough pushback on it. And I think it's political in nature from insurance carriers, like, you're killing us. AM Best just downgraded us because of the modeling, and you know, there's going to be some pushback in the industry. So hopefully the cycle will come again and that model will come down. But I would say that that modeling process that goes on behind the scenes is what's going to affect our pricing more than anything. We can say all day long, but we haven't had a hurricane in Florida for the last couple of years. We've been very, very good. You don't need to increase our rates. And they're going to say, but our model tells us so. So you know, again, I think it's hopefully cyclical, and we'll see it come off, but that model just went into effect the end of March, and some carriers are just now starting to use it. They're just now starting to model their entire book of business. Reinsurance renews typically on the beginning of quarters, like, you know, 4/1, 9/1, there's a lot of renewals, 1/1. And when they get their reinsurance increases, now the state of Florida is going to let them pass on a little bit more of that. So we're going to see some increase in rate. That being said, I did talk about insurance. So in a hurricane planning, and there is a great hurricane plan behind the little green sheet in this section that was done by one of our associations, and the gentleman is not here today. He was supposed to be, but he's not. But his property management firm is here, Gateway Property Management. And we had this hurricane seminar last year. Randy Jones participated in that with us because he does a lot of work in hurricane planning with his carriers as well. Lots of nifty software and helpful things for associations to plan. This plan in here, if you want it electronically, I can send it to you. I have gotten a release from the person who did it, and they did an excellent job. If your associations do not have a written hurricane plan, you talk about written policies, you know, you really need a written hurricane plan. You need to follow the plan. If you haven't gone through the exercise of writing a plan, it'll certainly make you think about things maybe you haven't thought about in the past. I mean, generally speaking, we say, okay, here comes a hurricane, batten down the hatches, let's put everything away, you know, put those storm shutters up and take cover. Well, for managing an association, you have a lot more to consider. You have people who don't live here, and you're managing their property, and they're up in Pennsylvania and Ohio, and the first thing they do is call you and say, what's going on down there, and how bad is it, and how much are my damages? So I have a little outline in here of what you should include in a hurricane plan. It really needs to be very, very specific. Who does what when? And when does it get implemented? And contact information, I would say, as a property manager, an association manager, all of the communications, save yourself a headache so the phone doesn't ring off the hook after the fact. Get them on the web. Put up a website for each association, and when they have a question, you send out an email to all those owners and say, here's your website, go to this website, and we will put up, you know, information as to what is happening. Please don't call, you know, and they go to the website. That makes it easier for everybody, because as a property manager, as an insurance agent, we couldn't answer the phone fast enough after Charlie. It rang. I worked, you know, 7 days a week, and that phone just lit up all day long. And it was people saying, please tell me what's going on. I saw it on the news. I could see my lamp through the roof. And, you know, they're crazy. So communication is everything, before the fact and after the fact. Communicate with your owners, you know, about your hurricane preparedness plan or your disaster plan, whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure we have too many other disasters that we can think about here in Florida other than anything that comes with the wind, whether it's a tornado or a hurricane. But you need to have all that contact information somewhere that board members and property managers can access, so that you can email, get the email addresses of everybody. Everybody lives on email. So you can send out an email that says, it's here, or it missed us. Because when you look at national news, all of Florida has been hit by the hurricane. It's a cloud this big, and it hit Key West, you know. So you want to give them that information. I think the other thing, and I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you this, but you better understand how your insurance works beforehand. How does that deductible apply? What is our deductible? What is our maximum deductible? We went through the process legislatively over the last couple of years where you had to figure out what your largest deductible could be and inform your owners, and now that's kind of been subdued again. You don't have to send out written notices saying, our largest deductible is 5% of our values, which is X, you know, and have it in a meeting. You can talk about it at a board meeting, and the board members get to decide what deductible they would like to assume. But you really need to know how that works. What are the duties under your policy? And again, this is a legal contract. You have certain responsibilities as to what you have to do in order to keep that legal contract in effect. And, you know, please abide by them. Number one, after a hurricane, you better protect your property from further damage. Charlie was a great one. I mean, we had 2 more hurricanes, every 2 weeks that just kept coming. You know, we had the loss out at South Seas. We put temporary roofs on those buildings like within 7 days, only to have them blow off 2 more times and put them back on 2 more times. Tedious, very tedious. It was the nightmare that would not end, but that's your duty under the policy, is to protect your property from any further damage. Easier said than done. And again, it comes down to good planning in advance. Are your limits enough? And we had some discussion on this about appraisals, and appraisals are going wild lately with them coming in higher or lower, or how are they trending, and why does this appraiser give me a number here and this one's over here? Associations need to pay a lot of attention to appraisals. Do not pick the lowest appraisal and buy your insurance on that, because it may not be enough limit. And when you get down to a claim and that's severe, you want every dollar you can get out of your insurance. And you want to understand what you have covered. Do you have mold coverage? Do you have law and ordinance? Can I build back to new code? How old is my building? Was I built to 2001 codes? If I was, then I'm probably okay. But the code changes on a daily basis, so you never know. Law and ordinance, I think, is the most important coverage you can buy on property insurance. And after a storm, you want to have law and ordinance because you're going to have to build your building back to code. And if you have to put on shutters or impact windows and you didn't have them before, it's an extra cost. You need to know if your insurance is going to cover that or not, and how much. How much coverage do I have for law and ordinance? Is it $1 million? You know, if I have to take my building down because it's more than 50% destroyed, and the association that did this hurricane plan, I think they were at 50.5%, and they knew if they were at 51%, they were tearing down their buildings. And they didn't want to do that. So they worked at it, you know, getting right back to 50%. But then you have a demolition cost involved with that, and that's part of your law and ordinance coverage. Do I have demolition to cart away the other 49% of the building that I have to take down? It's not all about, do I have wind and, you know, do I have fire insurance? It's about these other things that after a hurricane, you will find them to be the most valuable coverages you bought, worth every penny. Who do we contact to report a claim? We would prefer that you call us. You know, we will have generators going, our phones will work, we will be there 24/7, we will take claims. And when our phones fill up, there will be an 800 number listed for ASI and ACI on our website that says, please go there, or, you know, if our phone is busy. But we want you to tell us that you've got a claim immediately. The reason being is we've got to get adjusters from the end of the earth to get out and look at these properties. You have to start getting them fixed, and first one out of the gate wins. Okay, it's very much a race after the fact. Supplies become scarce, contractors become scarce, adjusters become scarce. So you just want to act quickly. Photographs. Pre-loss photographs are really great, and I had some associations actually call me this year and said that they were contacted by a photographer who was getting up in a helicopter to take aerial photographs of their buildings, and some of them were high-rises, and to get a picture of the roof as it stands, intact. And I said, do it, whatever it costs, because it's a little tough to take a picture of a roof if you got a 20-story building. So somebody coming by in a helicopter and snapping them for you was a great idea. Those pre-loss photos are terrific after the fact. It never looks quite like it did before the loss. When there is debris everywhere and pieces of building are demolished, it's sad, it's frightening, but it's a mess. And to try and tell an adjuster, this is what I think it used to look like, is not as good as a picture. 1,000 words. You need to set up in advance with, first and foremost, a restoration contractor. There are a number of them in the area. We tend to like to do business with some of them because they work well with insurance carriers. They know what insurance carriers are going to want to see as far as documentation. A restoration contractor, you can just sort of get on their preferred list, and when you call, they will respond. Some of them are bigger than others. The one thing I would tell you never ever do after a loss is sign a contract on site with a restoration contractor that has a dollar amount in it. Never do that. There were so many of them after Charlie. They were running up and down the islands and getting people to sign, well, we'll come dry you out and put on a temporary roof, and we'll get your debris out of here, sign here, 100 grand. They were stuck with that 100 grand, and it wasn't necessarily approved by their insurance company. And oh, by the way, they didn't have enough equipment to dry out that building, nor could they fix the hole in the roof. And it was a month later before services even started, and they were obligated for that $100,000. Horrible, horrible experience. You tell them, send me a bill, send it to my insurance company, time and materials, because you never know how long it's going to take. Out on Captiva, we had no power for 6 weeks. We had to pay for the generation of power for 6 weeks because we were trying to save the buildings, put temporary roofs on them, dry them out, you know, and tedious as it was, and 9,000 gallons of diesel fuel a day, it was quite an operation. You don't know how long you're going to be out of electricity. That would be the other thing that we found, that's something you can do in advance or recommend to your associations, is have an electrician set up your building to be plugged in to a generator in advance. Otherwise, it takes at least a day to have that electrical wiring done. And what that does is it bypasses your meter. Obviously, if you're pouring diesel fuel into a generator and putting your own energy into the building, you don't want your meter cranking at the same time, and you want this generator to plug in, bypass that a whole electrical circuit going into the building, and it takes about a day. But when you have a day of soaking wet building and mold growing, it's everything. Every minute counts. And if you have several buildings, you know, a day per building. So I would do that in advance as well. Roofing contractor is a good contractor to have an agreement with as well. They become very expensive after the fact. There's no more tile here in Lee County. I'm sorry. This tile that you paid $1.99 for pre-hurricane is now $6 a tile. And oh, it'll be, you know, 6 weeks before I can get it from Alabama to come into Florida. I mean, there's nightmares. What we call the demand surge. The cost of materials that go up after a hurricane is astronomical. Having a contractor lined up in advance that you know and trust, and there are a number of good roofing contractors in the area that did it well. I'd be happy to recommend them to you on an individual basis, but I'm not really here to do commercials for contractors. Anyway, that's really helpful because first person that gets their roof back on, or a temporary roof, is the first person to start drying out their building. You can't fix your building till you get it dry. And what we found, and the only way to get it dry, was we stripped the interiors of these buildings. They had their roofs open, the rain was pouring in, and we threw mattresses, couches, tables, chairs, carpeting, everything out. We had a restoration contractor come in and simply strip the units in order to get them bare, in order to get them dry, in order to stop the mold from growing, in order to build them back. I mean, it's just horrific. It's not about calling an adjuster and saying, okay, what do you think my damages are? Look at this. Well, you just don't know. You don't know until you start doing the work. So if you have contractors lined up, you're going to start doing the work sooner. The other thing from a financial standpoint, you all have deductibles on property insurance now. They're 3%, 5%. You calculate that. It's a big number. Well, you may or may not get over your deductible. We have a Category 1, Category 2. Most of our damages in this area are going to be outside the building, minor damage to building. We are under the deductible. Does every association have the funds in the bank and reserves to fund those deductibles? Probably not. One thing you can do to help them is get a line of credit with their bank in advance. You wait till hurricane day and the banks are kind of busy making loans. So do it in advance. Banks like condominium associations. They have a steady income. They're reliable. They're good owners. They maintain them. They have professional property managers. And they will do a line of credit. So if they have a horrifically high deductible for a hurricane, they can fund it over a couple of years. So they don't have to assess their owners $10,000, $20,000 a piece and hope that they'll get that from their owners. So, and the other thing is a debris removal contractor. Sometimes it's a landscape contractor, sometimes a restoration contractor. But again, in the smaller storms, that's mostly what we deal with, is there's, you know, trees and stuff all over the place and we can't even get to the building. So you've got to get that stuff out of the way first. So get that arranged in advance. And then after the storm, again, call us, call your carrier, get it reported as soon as possible, tell your owners what's going on, and get your contractors in there, I mean, the minute after the storm passes. Get on the phone, get out there with your cameras, take photographs. Property managers, I would say that's probably in your realm. You know, take photos of damages. You can post them on the website. You can show them how good it is or how bad it is. You will have to spend money to protect your property. That is covered by your insurance. So don't say, well, I'm just going to wait until we get our new roof put on. I don't have to put anything over that hall. No, it's, you know, rainy season, so it's raining every afternoon. You know, your insurance company is going to say, what were you thinking? You just let the water pour in? You know, you have that duty. And then I think understanding the emergency powers of boards. This got addressed in 718 after 2004 and 2005, fortunately, because it gives the boards the ability to make those emergency decisions without doing proper notification of a meeting. I mean, you're going to get two of them in a closet somewhere and say, we need to call somebody to get this mess cleaned up. And they're allowed to make a decision, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, on any of that, but they are allowed to borrow money. They can arrange for contractors. They can do cleanup. They can, name special assistant officers, because sometimes the officers of the board are not necessarily locals. And sometimes you need local people to handle this. So it's really about thinking about it. And today I think you heard a lot of stuff to think about. Insurance rates are going to go up. That's probably a given. That's not the message we as insurance agents like to deliver, because we get knives thrown at us and we're bad and we didn't shop your account often enough, far enough, wide enough. And we will be doing that marketing of the accounts. Our agency does it on every line of business, for every renewal. We don't care if it's your crime policy, your umbrella policy, your workers' comp, whatever it is. We market those every year. We are seeing some opportunities for some of those coverages with other carriers. And the property insurance, we're going to market it to whoever's playing. And Wes talked about the fact that, we got to keep our finger on the pulse of what underwriter is thinking which way today. And is this the guy that wants the 30% increase or the 5% increase? Or did he stop writing in that zip code? Or is he open for business now? Or did he change his requirements from 2004 newly built to 1995? It changes on a daily basis. So bear with us in the insurance business. And we are your friends, particularly before a hurricane and after. The only reason in the world to buy insurance is because someday you're going to have a claim and you want it paid. And we want you to buy the right insurance, and we want it to be the most effective, cost-effective, as well as after the fact. The true test is, how did it pay? How did it pay after a claim? Not how much did it cost and how did it compare? I see, associations all day long buying on price over peanuts in price, and they have no idea the difference in coverage. And that's our job, to bring that to your attention. And we always want to make our property managers look good, because we deal with you more so than we deal on a direct basis with the associations. And we don't want to be your headache. We want to be your partner. So we try to do those things. And, we have to get to that alcohol thing. But I'm going to open it up for questions one last time. And then we are going to go next door. We have hors d'oeuvres and open bar. We want to talk with you, give you a chance to stand and talk, because you've been sitting very patiently and listening all day. And we appreciate you being here.